They mocked her calm and steady breaths until the veteran said, "Marksmen, wait." The briefing room smelled like recycled air and alien sweat. 15 species packed into a space built for 10, every one of them loud in some way, clicking mandibles, shifting armor plates, low-frequency hum from the Rithali pair in the corner who communicated through chest vibration alone. The room was a wall of noise, of movement, of bodies preparing themselves for the thing coming at them from 12 kilometers out. Sable Voss sat in the corner and breathed. Not the short, tight breathing of someone holding fear down, not the deliberate performance of someone trying to look calm. She breathed the way a clock ticks, steady, unhurried, not thinking about itself at all. In through the nose, 4 counts. Hold, out through the mouth, 4 counts. Repeat. Her hands rested on her knees, loose and open. Her eyes looked at the middle distance and saw nothing and everything. The BioLink reader on the wall cycled through active personnel vitals. When it reached her, the number sat there plainly. 48 beats per minute. Jurexal caught it first. He was Norvathi, broad-shouldered, amber-eyed, built from the ground up for the chase, for the sprint, for the moment when pack instinct overrode every other thought and the body became purely an instrument of forward motion. His resting heart rate was 92. Before a mission it climbed to 140. He considered that normal. He considered anything less than that a system going wrong. He said something to the Norvathi beside him in their click-and-snap language. The translator rendered it with the graceless flatness it always used for contempt. The soft one has gone quiet inside her skull. The other Norvathi made a sound that needed no translation. Commander Daselian, standing at the front of the room running the briefing he had not quite started yet, paused. He was Teruvian, amphibious, large-eyed, capable of reading an entire room's emotional state through chemical signals too subtle for most species to register. What he was reading from the human in the corner did not match his categories. He turned to Lieutenant Yenna Farrow, who was 3 seats away, calmly calibrating the scope she would carry tomorrow. "Does Specialist Voss require medical attention?" he asked, keeping his voice neutral. Farrow did not look up. "She's fine." Daselian looked back at Sable. He pulled up the BioLink feed on his personal display. 48 BPM, cortisol at baseline, muscle tension registering as minimal. He had numbers like these in his database, from sleeping personnel, from recovery wards, from individuals in medically induced rest states. He did not have numbers like these from someone about to go into the field. He filed the observation and turned back to the map. The briefing room's main display came alive then, pulling everyone's attention forward, the Asheville corridor in orange relief, the Vorath vanguard moving as a cluster of red markers through the ravine approach, 14 units and 2 heavy armor platforms working their way toward forward base Kersh with the confidence of a force that had cleared the route and found nothing dangerous. They were correct that they had found nothing. They had not thought carefully about what finding nothing actually meant. Sable looked at the map for approximately 4 seconds. Her eyes moved to the ravine mouth, to the ridge above it on the dark half side, to the distance marker in the corner of the display. Her lips moved slightly, not words, not even a whisper, just the smallest motion of someone running numbers they already know. Then she looked away. Juraxal was watching her. He had been watching her since the BioLink number. There was something that bothered him about her specifically, not the humans in general. He had fought beside humans before. They were fine, they were acceptable. They moved fast enough and bled the right color, but this one specifically. This stillness. He had good instincts about threats, the kind that had kept him alive through 11 engagements, and his instincts were telling him something was wrong with her. He could not identify what. The Teruvian medic assigned to the base, a thin, careful person named Ula, had drifted toward the BioLink display out of professional habit. She reviewed Sable's numbers with a small frown forming. "Pre-engagement shock can present this way," she said to no one in particular. "She is not in shock," said a voice from the doorway. The room did not exactly go quiet, it went directed, like a compass needle swinging. Krethva filled the doorway without trying to. He was old in a way that showed everywhere, in the wear of his carapace, in the deliberate economy of how he moved, in the particular quality of his stillness, which was different from Sable's stillness, the way a mountain is different from a held breath. He was Vihari, insected in structure, hive-adjacent in the way he processed information, meaning he had 400 years of other people's combat memory sitting behind his own eyes, translated imperfectly but present. He had been a weapons instructor for 60 years. He stepped into the room, let the door close behind him. His compound eyes moved across the space with the unhurried scan of someone taking inventory. The Norvathi, the Rithali, the Teruvian medic with her frown, Daselian already pivoting to acknowledge rank. He saw all of it. Then his gaze reached Sable. He stopped moving. Not in the way someone stops when they are surprised. In the way someone stops when they recognize something they thought they would never see again. Sable, for her part, did not notice, or if she noticed, she gave no sign. She was still breathing, still looking at nothing. The biolink number ticked quietly on the wall display. 47. She had dropped a point. Krethva found a place to stand along the wall. He did not take a seat. He settled himself with the patience of old stone and watched her in the particular way that meant he would be watching her for a long time. Daselian cleared his throat and began the briefing. Maps expanded. Unit positions lit up in green. The Voreth vanguard moved in red along the ravine approach, 12 kilometers out and closing, and the whole room leaned toward the problem of stopping them except for two people. One in the corner who was already done thinking about it, and one against the wall who had just realized that. The ravine mouth sat on the display, narrow and deep, flanked by volcanic ridgeline on the dark half side. Sable's eyes went to it once more. Then she closed them. Not sleep, not shutdown. Loading. The right thumb of her right hand rested against her knee. The knuckle was scarred in a shape so specific it could only have come from one thing, pressed there 10,000 times over 10 years of sitting exactly like this. She breathed. The clock ticked. The room made its noise around her, and she let it be noise, and she breathed. Sable moved into position 4 hours before the mission window opened. She had not told anyone she was going early. She did not need to. Pharaoh knew, Pharaoh always knew, and had packed her kit without comment. They had walked out of the base in the dark and gone separate ways at the ridge fork, Pharaoh to the observation post carved into the volcanic shelf, Sable to the glass ridge 2.3 kilometers from the ravine mouth. The dark half of Kershdan had no dawn coming. It never would. It had a permanent, deep, windless cold and a silence so complete that Sable's own heartbeat was audible if she chose to listen for it. She chose to listen for it. She found the number, settled it, let it drop. She went prone on the glass ridge. And she waited. An hour passed, then 2, then 3. The volcanic glass under her was cold in a way that moved slowly through the insulation of her suit, not painful, just present, the way all the best discomforts were. Informative. She catalogued it and set it aside. Her scope was powered down, no active emissions, no thermal signature worth flagging, no light to catch. She was watching the ravine mouth with her naked eye in the dark, which was what she had been trained to do before she ever touched a scope. And she was reading the wind off the glass formations to her left with the peripheral awareness of someone who had long since stopped thinking of it as a skill. Back at the forward base, in the staging area where Juraxal's infantry company was running final equipment checks, someone had pulled up the coalition personnel biolink feed on the wall display. It cycled through active personnel. When it reached Sable's feed, it showed the numbers cleanly. Heart rate 46 beats per minute. Cortisol baseline. Muscle tension minimal. Position prone static dark half ridge. Time in position 3 hours. 42 minutes. Jiraxal looked at those numbers for a long moment. Then he made a sound in Norv, click that his translator produced after a short delay as laughter. "She sleeps," he said. "The human sleeps while we prepare for the fight." The two Norvathi beside him made agreeing sounds. A younger Rithali soldier, barely through his second engagement, looked at the display with genuine concern. "Is she unconscious? Those numbers are." "She's not," said Pharaoh through the open comms channel. Two words, flat and final, delivered in the tone of someone who had explained this before and considered each repetition a small loss. The comms channel stayed quiet after that. In the command center, Daselian had Sable's BioLink feed running on the secondary display. He kept returning to it between tactical updates. The numbers made no sense to him within his existing framework, and he was a careful enough commander to be troubled by things that did not fit his framework. He paged the Teruvian medic twice. Both times she confirmed that the readings were genuine and not a BioLink error. He sat with that. Krethva was not in the command center. He had requisitioned a small room off the tactical corridor 2 hours earlier, a storage space, barely large enough for a chair, and he had been sitting in it with a data tablet running through human military records. Old ones, pre-coalition contact, partially translated, partially redacted, the kind of files that existed in coalition databases because intelligence officers collected everything and understood almost none of it. He read slowly. He read about distance engagement, about positions held for 72 hours without movement, about engagement windows measured in seconds that were preceded by preparation measured in days. He read translated field accounts from human soldiers describing a state they called being in it, which none of the translators had found an adequate equivalent for in any coalition language. He read about breathing techniques practiced until they became involuntary, about pulse management, about a concept that appeared in multiple independent sources, from multiple human military traditions across multiple centuries, that translated approximately as the shot is already done. He set the tablet down. He thought about that phrase for a long time. Then he picked up the tablet again and found the real-time BioLink feed for active personnel. He pulled it to full screen. He put Sable's data at the center. 46 BPM. 5 hours and 11 minutes prone in the cold, in the dark, alone, 2 kilometers from a force that would process her as a threat and respond accordingly if they detected her. 46. He thought about the Norvathi at 140. He thought about himself, about what happened inside his own system when he was this close to contact, about the hive memory of 1,000 soldiers' bodies responding to proximity to danger with everything they had, blood moving, senses sharpening, every system climbing toward readiness. He thought about what it would cost to go the other direction. What kind of creature, what kind of training, what kind of discipline, what kind of will pointed itself at danger and went quiet? He moved his chair to face the BioLink monitor directly. He sat down. He was still. Not the way Sable was still, he knew that now, knew the difference. She was a system fully engaged, fully loaded, every sense open and outward, the body gone so quiet that the mind could work without interference. He was still in the manner of old things watching young ones do something remarkable. The numbers on the display did not change. 46. In the staging area, Jiraxal finished his equipment check and began sharpening his blade. Between strokes, he glanced at the BioLink display on the wall. The human's heart rate had not moved. He had been watching it on and off for 3 hours, partly out of contempt, partly out of the vague, unexamined irritation of someone whose instincts were telling him something he did not want to hear. He could not figure out why the stillness bothered him so much. He went back to sharpening. The blade caught the light. Somewhere on the Darkhalf Ridge, 2.3 kilometers from the ravine mouth, Sable breathed. Out 4 counts. In 4 counts. Hold. The Vorath vanguard was 6 kilometers out now. The ravine was waiting. The volcanic glass sang its quiet note in the cold, a frequency too low for most species to register, and she heard it the way she heard everything out here, not with effort, just with the open, patient attention of someone who had long since learned that the world tells you everything you need if you stop making noise long enough to listen. She was not asleep. She had never been more awake in her life. The Vorath vanguard entered the ravine at the 4th hour of the mission window. They moved well. Sable watched them and acknowledged this without judgment. They were disciplined, tight formation, the 2 heavy armor platforms flanking the infantry column, their scanning systems running full sweeps. They had checked for coalition signatures twice in the approach and found nothing both times. Their movement said they believed the route was clear. She let them believe it a little longer. Pharaoh's voice came through the earpiece, barely above a breath. First platform, left tread housing. That was all, the whole conversation. Sable had already found the tread housing, had found it 4 minutes ago, while the platform was still moving through the ravine's upper bend, had tracked its movement pattern and cataloged the slight overcorrection it made every 7 seconds on uneven ground. A mechanical tick, minor, the kind of thing you only noticed if you had been watching long enough and quietly enough to let the pattern emerge. She had been watching long enough. She had been quiet enough. She powered up the scope. The ravine floor came into sharp resolution. 14 units, 2 platforms. The column was compressed now, the ravine narrowing at the midpoint, the walls closing to 20 meters on either side. She looked at the column commander. She found him the way she always found them, not by insignia, but by looking at where everyone else looked when something required a decision. When the lead platform slowed to navigate a floor fracture, every head in the column turned in the same direction for exactly 2 seconds. She had her target. She settled her breathing. The calculation was not something she did consciously anymore. Wind reading from the glass formations done, filed, adjusted for. Distance to the tread housing done. The platform's movement pattern, the 7-second overcorrection cycle. She was already inside its rhythm, already 3 beats ahead of where it was, placing the shot in the space it was moving into rather than the space it currently occupied. The moon's rotational drift accounted for. The cold accounted for. The shot existed in her mind before her finger moved. She breathed in. Halfway out. Stopped. The platform hit beat 6 of its cycle. She fired. The round found the left tread housing at the exact moment the platform overcorrected, the impact stress compounding the mechanical strain, and 14 tons of Vorath armor sheared hard to the left and stopped. Not destroyed. Stopped. Locked at a diagonal across the ravine floor, and the ravine was 20 meters wide, and the platform was nearly 18 meters long, and the math finished itself. The vanguard column had nowhere to go. In the command center, Docelian heard the shot register on the tactical display as a single orange event marker. Then the first platform went red, immobilized. Then the column movement indicators slowed, bunched, stopped. The whole vanguard compressed into a space it could not move through. He stared at the display. She fired again. The second platform, rear of the column, blocking retreat, same principle. Not destroyed, placed. The ravine was now sealed at both ends by Vorath machinery the Vorath themselves could not clear quickly enough. The column commander's icon went red. Then the communications relay marker. Docelian counted backward through the time stamps. 4 minutes and 20 seconds. That was the total elapsed time from scope activation to the column's command structure collapsing. Contact, said Pharaoh through the command channel. Ready for infantry push. Nobody spoke for 3 full seconds. Then Juraxal's infantry channel opened, his voice loud, immediate, already moving before the order was formally given, and the staging area doors came open, and his company hit the ravine from the eastern flank with the full force of everything they had been holding. The Voreth vanguard was not prepared for them. They would not have been prepared for them regardless. But they were especially unprepared now, leaderless, jammed between immovable machinery, their communications down, their formation broken. What had been a column was now a cluster. What had been an organized advance was now a problem of geometry that had no solution under pressure. Juraxal moved through the ravine like everything he was built to be. He would tell the story later, as though the fight had always been his. In the command center, Daselian stopped broadcasting pheromones entirely. It was involuntary. His species did it in moments of overwhelming stimulus, grief, joy, shock, when the system simply ceased output because it could not process fast enough to transmit. He looked at the BioLink feed, still running on the secondary display. Sable's heart rate read 44. It had dropped during the engagement. Krethva, still in his requisition storage room, watched the tactical display update in real time. Platform 1, immobilized and placed. Platform 2, the same. Column commander gone. Communications gone. Infantry breakthrough confirmed. He read the time stamps. He sat with them for a long while. He did not look surprised. He looked like someone who had found the end of a long equation and recognized it as correct. The after-action debrief convened 6 hours after the Voreth vanguard's retreat from the Asheville corridor. 16 officers, 8 species, a room that smelled like recycled air again, the same as it always did, which Daselian privately found comforting in the way that familiar things are comforting when larger things feel uncertain. He was having trouble writing the report. He had 19 distinct vocabulary units in Teruvian for different categories of aggressive forward action, and not one of them applied to what had happened on the Darkhalf Ridge. He had been through the engagement record 3 times, and the closest he could get was an old borrowed phrase from a species now extinct that translated approximately as the kill that happens before the killing. His translation officer had looked at him blankly when he proposed it. He used the word fortunate in the draft. He knew it was wrong. He left it there anyway. Juraxal gave his account near the beginning of the debrief. He stood straight. He was cleaned up, calm now in the particular post-combat way of Norvathi soldiers, the system having spent everything it had and refilled with something steady and satisfied. He described the infantry breakthrough with the precision of a soldier who knew his work and was not ashamed to say so. He described the blocked ravine, the leaderless enemy, the way the formation collapsed under pressure. He described it as the conditions he had found when he arrived. He did not describe how those conditions had been created. Not because he was dishonest, because the connection had not assembled itself in his mind yet. The 2 events, the human lying on the ridge and the broken vanguard in the ravine, existed in separate categories for him, and he had not yet built the bridge between them. Nobody corrected him. Not yet. The debrief moved through unit performance assessments, logistical evaluations, a lengthy discussion about ammunition expenditure that Daselian moderated with the patience of someone who had sat through many lengthy discussions about ammunition expenditure. A Rithali tactical officer proposed a matrix for replicating the engagement setup. A Siervan strategist suggested the blocked ravine outcome had been partially lucky given the platform's position. Sable was not in the room. She had filed her after-action report 2 paragraphs, flat and complete, and returned to the armory. The report contained no commentary, no context, no explanation of process. It listed target acquisition, shot sequence, outcome. It was the shortest after-action report in the debrief package by a considerable margin, and it had more confirmed outcomes than any other by a considerable margin, and nobody had yet reconciled those 2 facts out loud. Pharaoh sat in the debrief because protocol required it. She answered the questions directed at her with the minimum necessary information, and spent the rest of the time looking at a point on the wall slightly above the heads of the assembled officers, which was a habit she had developed over years of sitting in rooms where people discussed things Sable had done without quite understanding them. Then Jurexal said it. He had been looking at the BioLink log. It was still displayed on the wall panel, a reference artifact from the engagement timeline, and the number from the pre-mission hours was still there. 46. He had been looking at it on and off throughout the debrief, the way you look at something that troubles you without knowing why. The human was malfunctioning before the engagement, he said, not aggressive, clinical. The considered conclusion of a soldier identifying a variable that needed to be accounted for. Someone should assess her. Her calm response was broken. The room absorbed this. Daselian, who had been thinking something not entirely dissimilar for most of the past 14 hours, looked at the BioLink number and said nothing. The Cheruvian medic Ula opened her mouth. Krethva spoke first. He had been sitting at the end of the table saying nothing for 2 hours. It was easy to lose track of him when he did that, easy to let the eye slide past, to fill the silence he occupied with the assumption that it was simply empty space. Several officers had already made that mistake and felt the shift when he spoke, the reorganization of attention toward the oldest thing in the room. She was not malfunctioning. He did not look at Jurexal. He looked at the number on the wall. 46. You are a pack hunter, he said. Your body was built for pursuit, for the sprint, for the close, for the moment when everything in you becomes one single forward thing. This is correct. This is what you are. Before engagement, your heart rate reaches 140 and you call that readiness. He paused. The room let him. She is not built for pursuit. She was never a pursuit weapon. A marksman's body must become a platform, stable, quiet, completely still, so that the instrument she carries can do the work the body would otherwise interrupt. Every beat her heart makes that she does not need it to make is noise, movement, error. She has spent years training her body to make less noise than yours does when you sleep. He looked at Jurexal then. 46 was not her system failing to prepare. It was her system completing preparation. She was not broken. She was loaded. The word landed differently in each language it translated into, but in every language it landed. Jurexal had nothing to say. The frameworks he had used to understand what he had seen, the blocked ravine, the leaderless column, the 4-minute window that had made his infantry push not just possible, but nearly effortless, were reassembling themselves around a center that had not been visible to him before. He stood in the reorganized version of what he thought had happened, and found it considerably quieter and more unsettling than the version he had walked in with. Pharaoh looked at a point on the wall. Daselian looked at the word fortunate in his draft report and deleted it. He sat for a long time with the empty space where it had been. 3 weeks after Kershdan, the Voreth Compact pulled its forces back from the Asheville corridor. Not a retreat, a recalculation. The distinction mattered to them. They were methodical. They reviewed their losses, identified the variables they had failed to account for, and adjusted their models. The adjustment kept coming back to the same problem. Their intelligence analysts produced a report. It was thorough, careful, professionally written, and deeply confused. It described a pattern of engagement failures along the Asheville approach that shared specific characteristics: command-level losses at extreme range, immobilizing rather than destroying critical assets, movement denial through precision placement rather than volume of fire. The pattern suggested a coherent system, a doctrine. The analysts reviewed every known coalition weapons platform and found no match. They called it a patience weapon. They could not classify it further. There was no equivalent category in their database. The report circulated inside the Voreth Strategic Command. Someone added a note at the bottom, handwritten in their notation system, which translated approximately as, "This may be organic in origin. Investigate the human contingent." The note was filed. The recalculation continued. On Kershdan, Krethva received formal requests from 4 coalition member species: Norvathi Command, Teruvian Tactical Division, Rithali Strategic Corps, Sirvan Military Academy, asking him to design cross-species training curriculum based on the engagement at Asheville. The requests were carefully worded. They used phrases like the Kirschdun methodology and the distance engagement framework and the patience protocol, which was a phrase someone had coined in a debriefing session that had since spread through coalition military communication channels with the unstoppable momentum of ideas that named something people already felt but could not say. He sat with the requests for 2 full days. Then he walked to the range. She was there. She was always there when she was not in the field, which was something her file noted and her superiors had long since stopped questioning. The range at Kirschdun Forward Base was a carved shelf of volcanic rock on the Darkhalf border, open at one end to a long, cold corridor of still air, and she had a static target at 800 meters that she ran drills on the way other people ran stretches. Prone, scope up, not firing continuously, cycling through position acquisition, breathing sequences, trigger pull rehearsal, the deliberate repetition of the same preparation that made preparation itself automatic. Krethva watched her for a while. She spoke first, did not look up from the scope. You want to know how to teach it? Not a question. Yes, he said. She fired, hit, did not mark the result, did not pause to evaluate, moved directly into the next cycle. You can teach the mechanics, position, trigger discipline, breathing sequences, wind reading. Those are learnable. She cycled the action. But the waiting, the actual waiting, that is not a skill. It is a conclusion. You get there by understanding that the shot is already done, that it exists the moment you decide to take it. Everything after that is just your body catching up. She fired again. Krethva was quiet. On the Darkhalf ridge behind them, the volcanic glass made its low sound in the cold, the one she could hear and he could not quite reach. What does it feel like, he said, when you reach that conclusion? She considered this longer than she considered most things. Like being very far away from your own hands, she said. Like the noise went somewhere else. You stop waiting for the shot and you start being the space the shot already passed through. He sat down on the rock behind her, not intrusively, at a distance, the way you sit when you are listening rather than observing. I cannot teach that, he said. It was not a defeated statement, it was a precise one. No, she agreed. Can it be trained toward? She thought about this. You can train the quiet. You can train someone to slow their body down, to learn what stillness actually feels like under pressure, to stop mistaking activation for readiness. That part is teachable. She paused. But the conclusion, the understanding that the shot is already real, that only comes from doing it enough times in the real thing that you stop being afraid of the space between deciding and acting. She fired. Hit. Time and position, she said. There is no substitute. Krethva looked out at the dark half of the moon. The permanent shadow, the volcanic glass, the silence so complete it had weight. My species has hive memory, he said. 400 years of other soldiers' experience behind my own. I have the memory of marksmen, of waiting, of long positions, but the memory and the experience are different things. Yes, she said. I know what patience looks like. I have never felt what it is. She did not reply immediately. She was in a breathing cycle, the kind that preceded a shot, and she ran it through to its end before she spoke. Most species can't, she said. It is not a criticism. You are built differently. You were built to act. Acting fast is its own skill and a real one. This is just the other side of that. She fired. Krethva watched the target marker register the hit at 800 meters. In 60 years of teaching weapons doctrine to coalition forces, he said, I have tried to help 43 species understand distance engagement, range, wind, calculation. Most of them learn the calculation. None of them learn the stillness. They bring their activation with them. They fight their own bodies for the duration of the shot. I know, she said. You do not fight your body. No. What do you do instead? She lowered the scope, turned over onto her back in a single easy motion, looking up at the permanent dark of the moon's shadow half-ceiling. She was thinking about the answer, not performing thought, actually thinking, the way she did everything, with complete and unhurried attention. I make an agreement with it, she said. A long time ago, when I started understanding what this was, I told my body that it was safe to be quiet, that I would not ask it to be quiet when it needed to be loud, that I knew the difference, and it believed me. She paused. I think it took about 4 years. Krethva said nothing. The number that had been on the wall display during the Kershdan engagement sat in his memory. 46. He put it next to 4 years of daily work to earn the right to that number. He put it next to the tread housing shot, the placement, the 4 minutes and 20 seconds. He put it next to the Vorath, calling it a patience weapon, calling it organic, not having a category for it. He put it next to the fact that she was 29 years old, and the agreement she had made was with herself at approximately 25, which meant she had been building this thing while his species was finishing its century of adolescence, while the coalition was still categorizing humans as mid-tier auxiliaries with acceptable field performance. Humans are the only species, he said slowly, feeling for the edges of the thought as he formed it, who treat time as something that has already happened. She thought about that. Maybe, she said, or maybe everyone can get there. It just takes a certain kind of quiet that most places do not teach people to want. She sat up, reached for her rifle, ran her thumb along the receiver, not checking it, not assessing, just the habitual touch of a person acknowledging a partnership. She went prone again. Scope up. In through the nose, 4 counts, hold. Krethva watched the BioLink reader on his wrist display cycle to her channel, watched the number appear. 45. She breathed out. Halfway. Stopped. In the war room above them, a dozen coalition officers were reviewing updated Vorath positioning, running arguments about the next approach corridor, projecting force deployments across maps that showed the whole weight of an ongoing war in clean geometric shapes. They were loud with it, the productive noise of minds working hard problems, of species that processed urgency through sound and motion, and the forward-leaning pressure of bodies that prepared for everything by climbing. Below them, on a shelf of volcanic rock at the edge of permanent dark, a woman lay completely still and breathed and was, in the only way that mattered, already done. The shot she had not yet taken existed in the future in its final form, true, complete, arrived at. She was just waiting for the world to catch up.